the Parliamentary Conservative Party seems to have this insatiable appetite for self-harm, and they can't seem to survive without wanting to sort of undermine, another leader, and that's ridiculous.
Let's turn then to our not three wise men, our three wise people who could offer some festive cheer to Rishi Sunak, or at least possibly shine a guiding star to help him to a better. Let's speak to the three people who know about these things. Katy Balls of the Spectator's political editor. Hi, Katy.
Hi.
You are bringing some gold to this discussion. Guto Harri was Boris Johnson's Director of Communications at Number 10. Guto, you bringing common sense? Frank and common sense.
Fantastic.
That's good, isn't it?
I'll settle for that.
Kate Fall, Deputy Chief of Staff to David Cameron when he was in Number 10. Do you know what MER is?
Not sure I do.
Right, fine, good. Well, we'll try and work that out between us. Katy, just wanted to start really where Callum was just leaving off. Rishi Sunak has been explaining this morning that he was very close to Boris Johnson at the time. I saw the Prime Minister probably more than I saw my own wife during this period of the pandemic. Is it a problem for him that when he's trying to look forwards, he's been dragged basically sort of, 2.5 years back?
Well, I think it's been a problem ever since he became Prime Minister that he is often dragged back, and that's partly because you just have former Prime Ministers still in the House of Commons. Now, of course, Boris Johnson has now left the Commons, but I think much of his premiership has been about what do his predecessors say. There aren't many examples of, Prime Ministers who have had that many active predecessors. It's a sign of the Tory dysfunction. And he also doesn't have that much time, so many of the decisions of previous governments, some of which he was clearly involved in as Chancellor, are things he is still having to grapple with. So I think it's symptomatic of his wider issues in his premiership.
So how serious, if you put all the things together, Katy, how serious are things right now for Rishi Sunak? Has everyone lost their minds, basically, by saying it's like Brexit all over again? Or is there actually some truth to his position being in trouble?
Well, I think it's like Brexit in the sense that you have different Tory tribes debating one another. And also, not only that, some of those Tory tribes see a policy, it's almost policy purity. So the policy that some are arguing for, if you believe Rishi Sunak when he says the Rwandan government won't take it, is one that wouldn't actually work. And if you do believe the Rwandan government is lying, so because Rishi Sunak has told them to, it still is quite unclear how you would get the stronger version through the House of Commons, given the left of the party. So I think in terms of irreconcilable policy positions, it feels a bit like Brexit. In terms of Rishi Sunak's position and the way Brexit has ended the careers, or Europe has ended the careers of several prime ministers, I think there's still some way to go. I think probably the most likely bad case scenario for Rishi Sunak right now is his party almost starts to look like a death cult, a hot mess, which fights with one another, potentially even in a worst case scenario has a confidence vote. But I think he would win that pretty comfortably. And therefore, no one would quite get what they want, but I think Labour would just have so much ammunition to say this is a Tory party that can't get anything done and only fights one another.
Guto, you were there at the dying days of the Boris Johnson government, where everything you touch doesn't turn to gold. In fact, quite the opposite. And this sort of sense of spiralling, you're unable to ever get back on the front foot again. Are those comparisons fair, do you think? Or are there just some people in Westminster who, a bit like Pam in Gavin and Stacey, just love the drama, just excited constantly that, it's been ages since we've had a new Prime Minister, so let's whip it all up again?
I think there's two problems. One is the Parliamentary Conservative Party seems to have this insatiable appetite for self-harm, and they can't seem to survive without wanting to sort of undermine another leader, and that's ridiculous. And they don't realise that this, in the end, there's only so much harm you can cause to yourself before it becomes fatal, and you die, and you take everyone else down with you. And the other is slightly more of Rishi Sunak's doing. I do think he needs to be more sure-footed, and those around him. For me, that chapter of cancelling a meeting with the Greek Prime Minister, at one level, doesn't matter at all, but at another, it shows a level of immaturity and messing up that is, there's just no room for that at that level. But the problems he has this week, I think he'll get through today okay. I think he'll remind people that actually he did two things very well as a brand new chancellor at the time. He got a furlough scheme up and running, and then the eat out to help out was well-intentioned to save an industry that was in deep trouble. But what he faces over Rwanda is horrific. And he's raised the stakes there, unfortunately. He was kind of nearly in a corner, but he's put himself firmly in a corner now, so that if he doesn't get this policy through, the harm to his reputation is huge.
Okay, Kate Fall then. What about you? Lots of people have got in touch pointing out that myrrh is a spice used in embalming. You ought to be able to run with that. So there we are. Is Rishi Sunak's premiership dead and buried, Kate?
Well, look, I think he's obviously in a problem. I mean, look, this Rwanda bill, you know, the whole Rwanda policy always seemed to be more like a narrative. You know, images of boats coming in, images of people going out on the plane, strong image, but the policy always seemed to me to be pretty weak. And I don't understand why he's spending so much time talking about an issue where he's losing trust on it. The rule of politics is talk about the issues that you can resolve. So I think he needs to diversify. He needs to take the fight to Labour. He needs to talk about things that make them uncomfortable, e.g. they don't have many policies. But look, Mark, I was thinking the other day about, you know, times when I was in number 10 when things were difficult. And of course, we had a run of terrible luck after, you know, the budget in 2012, the omnishambles, and on it went. And we could never really quite relaunch. Every time we relaunched, something else happened that went wrong. So it is very hard to regain the momentum in politics once you've lost it. And actually, it took us almost a year until the economy was doing better to get things going again.
I suppose that's so interesting, isn't it? Because then you just need time to just try and ride it out, and time is not something that Rishi Sunak has got.
Exactly.
Right, let's focus then on his options, Rishi Sunak. Let's first of all look at actually what some people thought he was going to do last week when he called that press conference. Should he do a John Major? Should he do a put up or shut up?
Every leader is leader only with the support of his party. That is true of me as well. That is why I'm no longer prepared to tolerate the present situation. In short, it is time to put up or shut up.
Or should he follow the example of, say, Ted Heath or Theresa May?
It was with reluctance that I decided the country needs this election. But it is with strong conviction that I say it is necessary to secure the strong and stable leadership the country needs.
Guto, let's start with you. What should he do? Put up or shut up? Challenge his MPs? Call an election? Something else?
I hesitate to echo him, but at one stage, you know, when I was in number 10, I saw more of Rishi Sunak than I did of my wife. We sat down every morning around the table in Margaret Thatcher's old study at about 8:15 and went through the events of the day. I've seen him up close and personal. I've seen him with Boris Johnson. I saw how well they got on at that point. Obviously, things soured a little later on. And what I'm getting at is this is a, you know, clean living, hardworking, super intelligent guy who understands global finance and economics better than most people on the planet. And so what do? You play to people's strengths. So you don't try and build him up to be some macho man who's going to turn around little boats. You say, if the biggest issues facing modern Britain is how to sort of overcome major economic challenges and indeed take advantage of major economic opportunities, not least in AI, where a guy educated in the West Coast of America is better placed than most for that. Play to those strengths. But the idea that Rishi Sunak is the guy who blows out the sort of Greek prime minister and then stands up and says, put up or shut up, and I'm going to send people to Rwanda and you just watch how hard I am. It's ludicrous. It's not credible. And actually, for a lot of us, it's not attractive, even if it was credible. So there is an opportunity to get back to what Rishi Sunak is there for. Why God made Rishi, if you put it that way, is to be a sort of calm, reassuring, hardworking, thoughtful leader of a country that is trying to overcome really difficult times. Plays to those strengths, and there can be advantages for him as well as the rest of us.
Kate Fall, you talked about when David Cameron's premiership got into periods of trouble. What do you think what advice do you think David Cameron might be giving Rishi Sunak right now?
Well, I think I'm sure that he is a reassuring person for Rishi in his cabinet and also sort of dealing with lots of the very difficult issues that we're facing globally. But I think, you know, Rishi's got to start talking about things that he's trusted on, not just spending his whole time on the one issue that he seems not to be. He needs to talk about meeting long-term plans and the fact that Labour don't have many policies or don't like to talk about their policies as well. And then, of course, the big issue for Rishi, the big decision is when he holds the election next year. And, of course, that's the question he's got to face. Does he sort of wait it out and hope the polls are going to prove the economy is going to prove and the party is going to be liking each other more? Or does he take the view that none of those things are going to be aligned and he's better sort of gathering the forces together and going in May? And I think that's the million-dollar question.
What, in terms of when you might call a general election? I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? There's all this talk about about his options, and is Boris Johnson going to come back? Is Nigel Farage going to become a candidate as well? Some of the powers that any prime minister has is who is a candidate is one, but also when that election is, and you can use that as a power over your MPs.
Exactly, and the fact is that at the moment the MPs are panicking because they're worried about losing their seats. So the one thing that Rishi holds is the power at the moment to decide when that election is. I don't think there's going to be another leadership election. I think this is all talk about the post-election leadership election, and that's why he needs to try and unite the party and MPs and focus on the next election, not on infighting.
Katy, what advice do you think Rishi Sunak should be taking then about what he should do, today, this week, this month, next year?
So I think the problem on boats is he's ultimately gone for give both sides a bit, though I would say the right are getting more than the One Nation side when it comes to this bill. But the right are harder to satisfy. I think they're taking a more purist approach. So what Rishi Sunak could say is, if this doesn't work, I'll put leaving the ECHR in the Tory manifesto. That might help with some of them, but some would say, why don't we do it now? And also the left of the party would say, we don't want this. Therefore, I think in a way, the best thing Rishi Sunak has going for him is not just that he can pick when the election is that a majority of MPs don't want to change leader, even if they don't particularly rate Rishi Sunak. And I think the closer you get to an election, perhaps to be able to crystallise that idea in their minds, which is, do you think in terms of your electorate it's better to have ongoing talk and fighting, or getting to a point where months to go, it could be as soon as May, focus your minds? Now, that might be wishful thinking in terms of where the party is, but I think that's where a majority of Tory MPs still are. So using them to calm down their other colleagues might be the best way forward.
In fact, you talking about that, I saw at the weekend a guy called Alex Dean, who used to work for the Tories some time ago, says if the PM loses the Rwanda vote, we should go to the country. Snap election. This is an immigration election, a one-issue vote. Do you back us in trying to control immigration or not? And I sort of pointed out to him that if you look at the polling from YouGov in terms of the best party, the Tories are currently behind Labour, Don't Know, and None when it comes to the best party on asylum and immigration. So I wasn't sure how smart an idea that would be either. Even they're playing this card. They think it's a big card for them to play, but they're behind Labour on this as well, Katy.
Yeah, and I think the other problem is it only works if you have a united Tory party. You have the same solution on stopping the boats, and that election would be different Tories saying different things. Even if you went for ECHR, leaving it, there'd be Tories on the left saying we don't support that. So I think that's the tricky thing about this stop the boats election. So I'm conscious, Kate, let you come in there, because I'm certainly conscious having two people with almost identical names makes it quite problematic. Kate, Fall.
Exactly. Well, I agree with Katy. I mean, the problem is they don't actually have a solution for this problem. So going to the electorate, making that the centre point of their election is a very, very high risk, especially if the party's divided. And on the ECHR, again, back to Katy's point, it just sort of exacerbates splits, because one group of the party think that their international standing and human rights at a time was sort of fighting Russia up against China is exactly the wrong thing to do, and the other half think it is the thing to do. So it's just more Tory splits going into an election.
Finally, Katy Balls. Well, Kate Fall might have a view on this. I realise Katy Balls and Kate Fall is quite similar. Katy Balls, Nigel Farage comes third in the I'm a Celebrity jungle. We've got some Tory MPs wanting him to come in as a candidate. He says he's not going to join the Tories. Is that how high up the list, the long list of things that the Rishi Sunak needs to be worried about? How high up the list is Nigel Farage?
I think it's fairly high. I don't think it's top, but if you go from Reform being on 10 points to about 15 points, if you look where the Tories are, you'll start to see a lot more panic. I think that defections to the Reform Party are fairly unlikely because MPs will think they'll lose their seats, unless they think, I might have one great last stand to make a point. But it will just further exacerbate those right-left tensions within the party and potentially reduce this Tory, if the numbers stay where they are, reduce this, Tory result to something pretty disastrous if they can't curb the threats.
Well, we will wait and see whether or not the jungle can be turned into a new leadership bid. Katy Balls from The Spectator, Guto Harri, former Director of Communications to Boris Johnson, number 10, and Kate Fall, former Deputy Chief of Staff to David Cameron, number 10. Thank you for providing your wisdom. Our three wise, I'm not going to get a job at the Nativity at this rate. Our three wise persons. Thanks very much for guiding us through that. Some advice as Rishi Sunak faces his nightmare before Christmas.